Hello and welcome to episode 10 of our webinar series, Mental Health and Wellbeing in COVID-19. My name is Theron Nightenfit and I have Mark Baker here on the line.
Hi everyone, great to be here again with you.
How are you doing today, buddy? You alright?
Yeah, doing well this side, doing well.
You staying sane?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm doing my daily checklist from the resources. So
Good,
yeah, it's working out
man,
well.
Good man. We don't want to be hypocrites, yeah? So well done, well done. Okay, today's webinar title is The Way You See the Problem is the Problem. We'll get to that in a second. Let's do a quick recap so that we can just make sure we're keeping up to date with what it is that's come before. In the last webinar, we spoke about a couple of key concepts. We unpacked transactional analysis theory, and we talked about how helpful that is for understanding the way we engage with each other, how we interact, and of course how that plays a part in understanding the dynamics at play in our relationships. And we launched this idea for you of how to feel okay in your relationships. And of course, that was the key question. Who is okay? Are you okay? Are others okay? And the place that we want to get to is a place of understanding that I'm okay and that you're okay. And the key task that we set for you with our guest, Priya, was to, at the end of the day, maybe spend a bit of time just to try and unpack some of the transactions from the day to gain some self-awareness by thinking through what different ego states, parent, adult, or child, we may have played into during the day. So I hope you did that at the end of the last webinar, at the end of the day. And yeah, I trust that that is helpful and has been helpful for you. Today, we are looking at the concept or the line, the way you see the problem is the problem. Of course, some key concepts here. We're going to be talking about thinking fast and thinking slow. We're gonna introduce you to an idea that the way that what you see is all there is, or it's broken down into that little acronym WYSIATI. It's an interesting way to remember it. What you see is all there is, and then of course we're going to give some tips and some help around how we can change the way we see our reality. We have a guest with us today, Alison Godner, who is a friend of Mygrow. We do a lot of work with her at Mygrow, and really excited to get her perspective. She is an expert. She is a specialist in generational blending in the workplace, but not just in the workplace, by extension, the impact that has in all of our lives. So we're going to be spending some time chatting with her today. So Mark, thinking fast and slow. Who's this angry lady and what's going on here?
Yeah, Theron, well, I think, some of the work of Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, couldn't be more helpful for us in this time, in this lockdown. And as you look at that slide in front of you, of course, instantly you know that this lady is angry or frustrated or whatever it is, but straight away the amygdala that we've looked at in previous episodes is picking up that there's a threat, and we instantly, we think very fast and interpret that instantly. But if we do that maths equation, even putting the slide together, I couldn't for the life of me tell you what that answer is without pulling on my iPhone to calculate it. And of course, there's different ways that we process the world. Sometimes it's thinking fast through instant information that we need to process. This is often emotional information. And then we think slow through different calculated ways of thinking that we need to have. And this was the whole kind of thesis of Daniel Kahneman's book. And if we go on to the next slide, essentially what he was representing in that book, Thinking Fast and Slow, was two different types of thinking systems. The one is the fast way of processing, thinking fast, as he calls it, which is more to do with the unconscious. It's very automatic. It's got to do with everyday decisions that we need to typically make, ranging from going to the grocery store and picking out, the margarine that you always buy, even if they've put a markup on it, all the way through to instantly knowing when my wife Robin is frustrated with me. The second she opens up her eyes in the morning, and this thinking fast is quite error prone, which is what we're going to look at in this particular webinar. And then there is this thinking slow system, which of course has got to do with our frontal lobes. It's very conscious, very effortful. This has got to do with much more complex decisions like the 17 times 24 that we looked at. And this is much more reliable. The problem is, and this is part of the thesis of his book, is that if we spent our lives with the thinking slow system, we would never get very far in our lives. If it took me 45 minutes to navigate which margarine I was going to buy each time, it would take us 2 days to do the shopping list that, my wife gives me. I don't know what your shopping list is like, Theron, but it becomes very tough.
Not margarine.
But the key question for us really is, to have a look at when there is a calculation to be made, how our thinking fast causes us to make errors. And I want us to have a look at just this little problem that Daniel Kahneman gives us. Yeah, Theron.
Before we get there, just to summarize, thinking fast is like autopilot. Yep. Right? Is that what you're saying? It's like it's sort of the default we go into when there are decisions that we think we understand or that is part of our daily, as you said, buying the margarine. It's there's no need to think this through again. Excuse me. There's no reason to think it through. We've already done it. We know it. It's autopilot. We do it without thinking. Of course, we are thinking, but it's without thinking. Yeah. Whereas slow is when we're actually using our intelligence or our frontal lobes, as we can see in this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And something just to refer back to a previous episode, Theron, is part of what's powerful about emotional intelligence is that it is using techniques to balance the emotional centers of the brain with the frontal lobes. And so really, in one sense, this would fall under the realm of decision making in emotional intelligence. It's using certain techniques to bring a little bit of balance between these two ways of doing it and to start knowing which is appropriate, because of course we're doing both all the time,
because they're both helpful.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. So let's jump on to this next problem. I mean, this is something that Daniel Kahneman puts in his book. This is not ours, but he says a batted ball costs $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? And if you're watching this somewhere, and if you're anything like me, instantly your brain forces you to think, well, the ball obviously costs 10 cents. Duh. The bat is $1 more than the ball. The bat is $1. The ball is 10 cents. But this is our thinking fast brain jumping in, trying to make it easy for us to just make decisions in the world. And actually, if you took a little more time, you'd realize that that's the wrong answer. We've made an error. And in fact, the ball costs 5 cents and the bat costs $1.05. And if you add up $1.05 and 5 cents, that's $1.10, and there's $1 difference between them. So, the reason why a little gimmick like this is important for us to see, Theron, is that we have certain biases and blindness in our thinking. Now, we understand that from visual cues. If you go to the next slide, you'll see these are kind of optical illusions that we're all very familiar with. And, if we just put the solution to both of them, the one on the left there, we obviously see the top line as being, or the top horizontal line as being shorter than the one underneath it, just because of the way the arrows on the end are pointing. And on the right-hand side, we look at the difference in color between A and B on that checkered board. And because of the things that our brain is picking up on optically, these are, of course, optical illusions, we see A and B as being a different color. And we see the horizontal line at the top being shorter than the one at the bottom. But if we just show the solution here quickly, and I wish we had more time, Theron, to process this, but of course they're exactly the same length, those two horizontal lines on the left, and of course they are exactly the same color, block A and B, but because of the way our brains have learned to process a checkers board or a chess board, we obviously think of them as different colors, but when we put the mask over it, we can see they're exactly the same color. Do you want to jump in on anything there?
Yeah, we're essentially making a prediction of what we see, which ends up being wrong.
Yeah, now, I mean, the reason why this becomes powerful for us, Theron, is not so that we see the tricks of optical illusions, because those are a little bit gimmicky. But if we jump to the concept of how our life stories impact on the way we view the world, we can jump to this next slide, and the concept of what you see is all there is. And any adult watching this particular webinar series now is going to feel a little bit embarrassed about what's in that jar if they're watching it with their kids. And yet, their kids are not seeing two lovers in the jar. What the kids are seeing is essentially the dolphins in the jar. And, I've literally sat with crowds of people using this picture at times, Theron, and some of the guys, I remember being on the mines working with leadership development, and some of them would fight with me and say, Mark, there are no dolphins in this jar. I don't see dolphins, even if I highlighted it for them there. And so, of course, this is an example of how our life story, because as adults, we've, through our life story, learned about lovers and learned about the erotic and whatever. And so we see the erotic. That's what emerges for us in the picture. That's how we interpret the world. And for kids, they don't have any story of lovers and what erotic, what. They just see dolphins swimming around in the jar. So this becomes powerful for us in terms of what we see is all there is. We see the lovers in the jar. It's not to say that there are lovers in the jar. Someone else may see the dolphins in the jar. Do you want to jump in there, Theron?
Yeah, it's the different perspective we have comes from the backstory. I mean, this ties us back into some of the previous webinars about how our subconscious comes with us everywhere. Our subconscious is the accumulation of the whole story up till now, and it sort of informs the story going forward, which in this case informs what it is we see. The perspective we have comes from the backstory. I'd love to transition us on to this little video clip that I want to show the viewers. We're going to show you a little video clip, and here's a task for you. I'm going to ask you this question. How many times do the two people bounce the tennis ball? Okay, that's your task. You need to tell me, after watching this short video clip, how many times the two people bounce the tennis ball. Okay, you got that? Ready? Okay, let's watch the clip. All right, so how many times? How many times did they bounce the ball? 5 times, 10 times, 20 times? I'm sure you guys accurately figure that out. But did you see Mark and I in the background waving? Did you see that part of the video? Mark and I standing there just underneath the big yellow frame, and we're waving at you guys. Did anybody see that? Anybody? Can't hear you. I'm guessing not. And then the second question is, did you see those two people walking literally between the tennis ball throwers with straight legs, without bending their knees? Because they did. It was very unnatural, very unrealistic. People don't walk that way. But two people walked straight through the tennis ball playing people without bending their knees. And I'm guessing you didn't see that. I'm going to let you watch this video again so you can see what it is I'm talking about. Mark and I waving to each other, and the two straight-legged, non-knee bending walkers. Let's watch it again. Now, you may be thinking, how didn't I see those things? How is it I didn't see those strange things? I mean, I know Mark and Theron's face. I see them every day on this webinar. Why didn't I see them in the picture? Or how could I not pick up on the fact that there's some people walking without bending their knees? Mark, talk us through what has just happened here and what the impact is for us in our daily lives.
Yeah, I think, Theron, this is, for those that have seen it, this is obviously our remake of the Invisible Gorilla experiment, and definitely go Google that, those of you who haven't seen it. But essentially what it is we what you see is all there is. The things we pay attention to is what exists in our reality. And we seem to filter out other parts of the world. There's actually a little part of the brain called the reticular activating system that essentially gets rid of other information that we think is irrelevant. This is the same reason why when you buy a new car, all you see on the roads are the other new cars like your new car. And, to make our question about, how many times the people bounce the ball in this video clip, we don't really care in terms of our lives, Theron, you and I, or the viewers, how many times the people in the little, COVID-19 webinar bounced the ball, or whether they were straight legs or not. What we care about is our spouse, our children, our parents, our friends, our colleagues, what it is that they are doing in our lives and what we are seeing. Are we seeing the things they're doing right? Are we seeing the things they're doing wrong that are frustrating us? So many times in my life, I catch myself realizing that I'm just paying attention to stuff that's not making my life helpful. I'm paying attention to the number of times people are bouncing the ball, and I'm missing so many other wonderful things in the world around me. And that's part of the power of these small little conscious techniques we can implement in our lives, is it trains our brain to be able to take in more of the wonderful experience of life that's around us. And if all we're paying attention to with the people around us is what they're doing wrong, well, then of course we're going to get into that downward spiral of negative emotion that we were talking about, I think, in the previous webinar. But if we can start training ourselves to actually just pay attention and see Mark and Theron in the background, or see our family doing stuff in the background that's right, wow, we can radically change our experience of the world.
Yeah, I mean, if I just apply this in the relational context, which is, of course, where we're going to be getting to in our conversation with Alison, we're all facing different things. You know, you may be a mother at home with a toddler and you've never gone this long without a break, without a spa day or a babysitter or whatever. And you know, you have this moment of having such great time with your child, or at least you could be. Or maybe you are, you know, you live with the grandparents. Now, my in-laws are listening, so I don't want them to misunderstand me here. But we have in this environment, in this context, my kids are with the grandparents, and it's amazing. I happen to have a really good relationship with my in-laws. But if I didn't, if the lens I brought to this moment was one where my mother-in-law was the witch, then I would be seeing only her input in my children's lives in this time where we can't get away from her as being negative. What I see is all there is, when it might not actually be the truth. Or if I go back to that other example, maybe the joy of this moment is being stolen from you because all you can hear is this colicky baby who will not stop making a noise. And the way that you see those people, the way you see whether or not they are putting their mug straight in the dishwasher or whether or not they are putting the milk back in the fridge, that is the problem that you are experiencing. That is the moment. And in these times of heightened tension and heightened stress, those things really can start to become issues. But as soon as we come and change our perspective, we realize the world is maybe not exactly how we thought. That the lenses we have, which ties back to a previous webinar, the lenses we have make us see things a certain way. Before we jump on to our chat with Alison, yesterday we mentioned that there is a new landing page that you can go and add some questions. And this question, actually, the one we've chosen for today, is a great segue into the conversation we'll be having with Alison. Let me read it with you. I'm a mother of 3 and I obviously have my kids at home and I'm trying to work. Everyone has been saying that we'll have so much extra time during lockdown, but all I have is extra frustration. I find myself constantly frustrated with my kids because they don't understand my responsibilities. Help! What can I do to protect my family relationships during this shutdown? I don't want to be a bad parent, is essentially what Moira from Southern Suburbs is saying. So, on that note, let's jump into this conversation with Alison. Alison, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
There you are. Welcome. Good to have you today.
Thank you, Theron. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, we're really excited about everything that you were going to share. Let me just tell the viewers a little bit about you. So Alison specializes in generational blending. She works with teams and their leaders. She helps them to co-create new initiatives that shift humanity, mapping creative solutions from new perspectives. I think this is part of the reason why we feel your voice would be so valuable on this webinar today, because your whole work life is geared around how do we get people from different perspectives, in your case generationally, to be able to find collaborative, creative new ways forward, which of course has a huge relevance for our current moment. So I think the best thing to do is for me to just ask you a couple of questions and let's just see where the conversation goes.
Brilliant.
Okay, so first question is, what advice can you give us? What input can you give us around how we can, during this time, interact across different generations in a way that is going to actually give us, an increase in personal resources and essentially an increase in positive emotion and a positive experience of this moment?
So I think, Theron, to be honest with you, it really boils down to just understanding the characteristics, I think, of the different generations, right? And you mentioned earlier when you were chatting to Mark about, a lot of households right now have a couple of generations trying to coexist, right? I know in my household, we have 3, right? So we have a baby boomer, myself is Gen X, and then I've got 2 Gen Zs in the space. And I do want to apologize beforehand if there's noise, because that's coming from the Gen Zs, right?
That's everyone's life right now, Alison. It's completely excusable.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I just think a little bit of understanding. One of the things I find when I'm working with generations, particularly in the workplace, is this judgment that happens. That a millennial will look at a boomer and say, "Wow, you just don't get it, and you're so stuck in your ways," and it's this inability to get out of that judgmental swim lane, right? And to just say, okay, well, let's not look at the negatives. Let's look at the positives of what this boomer can actually bring into my space. And equally, so it happens all through the generations. And so for me, yeah, that's critical is let's understand the good, right, that these generations bring. And tap into those characteristics a little bit. I want to give you an example, a very real example of what's just happened in our household, right? So when we knew that lockdown was happening, I think the second day, the 3 generations sat and decided that we need to probably have some structure. So the boomer said, the X said, I said, okay, let's put some structure together. The two Zs went, what are you talking about structure? Right? And so I said, well, guys, we do need to have some kind of a routine. Otherwise, what's going to happen after 21 days, you're going to develop really bad habits and it'll be hard to break them afterwards, right? So eventually I could see the Zs got the heads around that. So we sat down, we started with, we need to do something physical, we need to do something mental, we need to do something creative. Okay, so that went down. Then the boomer said, right, let's put time frames to this. Okay. Well, the X's nearly went ballistic. The Z's nearly went ballistic, right? The Z's went, no way. There's absolutely no way you're putting time frames on this. I don't want to have to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Why do I have to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning? Right? What if I get up at 9? And so what was really interesting for me when I observed, and one of the things there is one just has to go into observer mode sometimes. You guys were talking about backstories and what drives our behaviors, and what I've realized is sometimes just to elevate out of that, that backstory or that narrative of yours and just become an observer, right? And so I sort of took a step back and I thought, right, here are these guys. And essentially what they were saying, so when I asked the question of the Zs, they said, Mom, give us the freedom within the structure. Okay? And trust us that we'll do it. So these were two, and this is the Z generation. If you had to ask me, oh, what are the words that kind of like come up over and over again when I'm working with Zs? It's freedom and trust. Okay, it's one of the reasons why they really, and I'm not being funny, but they don't like Facebook because they don't really trust it. Okay, so it's a very interesting dynamic, and I had to hear that, whereas I was going, but no, a structure has very definitive, and the boomer was agreeing with me, right? It's my husband. But the Zs were not seeing that. So we had to actually just, take a step back and say, okay, it's absolutely true. Let's just give them the freedom, but trust that they're doing that. And that is exactly what's happening.
Okay, let me just jump in there and get real practical about this because it's, you've obviously walked through this story now, and this is an experience you've had. Give us some practical ways. I'm a Generation X, so I want the practical, the structured way as well. How can, for instance, Moira, who asked us this question of, she's going crazy because her kids don't figure, essentially what we're seeing in that question is she needs a structure to get her work done, and they're not respecting that structure. What can she do to facilitate a good relational flourishing moment there?
Yeah. Okay, so I think you said 3-year-olds. That's a different generation, right? This is Gen Alpha. Okay,
I don't think she mentioned she had 3 children. I don't know what ages.
3 children, don't know what ages. Sorry, I read it. I heard it as 3-year-olds. Yeah. Okay, so the structure, maybe boundary is a good word. I don't know, but the structures are very it is quite an X and a boomer word, but so remember, certainly with the Zs, is they have an ecosystem. Trust me on this.
What is the age of Z? What is Gen Z? What's that?
Oh, right. Okay, so Gen Z is from ages 8 to 25.
Okay, so they have an ecosystem and a structure.
Yeah, so just to also maybe give you a little bit more clarity on that. So a true Z, right? And in South Africa, we call them Zs. Everywhere else, they call them Zs. But a true Z would be 8 to sort of 19, 20. Then from 20 to 25, we talk about Zennials. So it's sort of cusp generation. A mixture of the Zs and the millennials, right? But, okay, so Zs absolutely have an ecosystem, and they tuned in, Theron. They know this ecosystem, right? They're very tapped into finding some kind of a balance. It's there. We just have to trust that it's there, And I find myself so often as an ex, being quite controlling, right? And thinking, well, if I just leave them alone, they'll just be on their screens 24/7.
Yeah, can I trust them? They want trust, but can I trust them?
You know what I mean? Well, Here's the thing. If you are on your screens 24/7, right, then more than likely they're gonna check that out and go, well, geez, mom and dad are doing it, why can't I, right? But actually, innately, they do have an ecosystem, and they are tapped into. This is a generation that is mega interconnected, right? And I want to use that word. I'm not saying connected. I'm saying interconnected. When I think of the Z generation, I think of blockchaining. I don't know if you've ever seen a graphic of blockchaining, right? And you've got like that middle point, and then you've got all of these touch points around, and these dotted lines that connect. That's the Z generation. They just connect or interconnect with all of these other touch points. So they don't forget about them, right? They're a love generation. So they love the planet. They love nature. They love the animals on the planet. They love one another, and they love, mom and dad and granny and grandpa and everybody else. So, and it is interesting, my son said the other day, he said, Mom, we need to tap in with granny and grandpa, and I was like, you're right. And he said, no, come, we've got to phone granny and grandpa, how they're doing. I was blown away by that empathy, So to get
Can I jump in quickly? Sorry, I feel like you are answering these questions. Just that last little story you shared there about, phoning granny and grandpa. There is value that is there in the different generations. There is a wealth in that perspective that if we can blend those, which I'm sure is the bulk of your work, if we can see the value in the other perspective, instead of just living in what you see as all there is zone, that can really unlock a time of flourishing. We have just about 1 more minute here with you and me, and I'd love to get your thoughts in 1 minute on what does the future look like? You've used the word in my chats with you before, AC, after Corona. What does the world look like? And what is the perspective of the Generation Zs that actually might be really helpful as we transition out of this?
Okay, I can get really passionate about this. So you're going to have to stop me, Theron.
I'll cut you off.
For me, honestly, AC is about quantum. Sorry to use a word like that, but it's a futurist kind of word. But we are really no longer in linear. We cannot be in linear, okay? We cannot be thinking in a linear way. The AC is a whole new world is arriving, and it is new. I'm sick and tired of this language that I keep hearing all the time of re-engineer, realign, reinvent. Can we take the re away? There's nothing, right? We're into new. So it's new invent, it's new align, it's new engineer, or whatever other, beautiful words we're using. So take away re, put in new, because it's absolutely new. And can I just say, for those of us in the generations where we are so programmed to be linear, it's going to be very tough to shift into quantum. So I'm saying, bring the Zs on board in whatever business you're in your family, whatever. If you're looking for solutions or you're looking for the new, you can only do it with the Zs alongside you.
Yeah, we're heading into uncharted territory,
Totally.
and we actually have some experts that we may not have had the perspective to see as experts.
And listen to them, Theron. Listen,
I'll
sit them
try.
down,
I will try.
ask and listen.
Okay, thanks so much, Alison. I really appreciate your
Pleasure.
input. I know that you have added so much value to this, and I'm sure that a lot of parents, at least, maybe even hopefully their children, around who are listening to this webinar are getting great value and have been inspired to see the problem a little bit differently. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Cheers.
Well, Mark, I don't know what your thoughts are. I always enjoy what Alison has to share. A lot of insight around, just relationships and generations in general. Anything you'd like to say in response?
Yeah, I think Alison's on point. Hey, there's so much about the different generations that we just miss, And I mean, my wife and I are in different generations, in terms of the way they are clustered. And so, it's also fascinating for me in our household, even though there's just two of us that are, a little bit apart. But it is just mind-blowing how we see the world differently.
Yeah. All right, we pretty much need to wrap up this webinar. Just a reminder again, if you are joining us new, I know we have new people joining us every day, please go and make sure you sign up for the free trial on the Mygrow website. You can see there in the red arrow where you can get access to that. And then if you scroll down and look at the COVID-19 tab, you'll see where there is a list of additional resources that we've made available. And also you can watch any of the replays. If you're joining us late in the series, then please do go and watch those replays there. Thank you so much. We look forward to the next webinar. Mark, why don't you sign off before we have...
Yeah, just to say, listening to Alison's input about different generations, why don't you go and use that daily checklist with some of the other people that you're around, and do some of the positivity ratio activities with people in other generations. I think it'll be such a fruitful way of just learning about how others see the world. Yeah. Thanks so much. We'll see you again in the next episode.
Great. Don't forget to head on over to the Wellbeing and COVID-19 landing page and ask a question, which we will be able to address in future webinars. You may be alone at home, you may be with others, but we're all in this together, and we can grow and we can add tips and tricks and resources in terms of how we can handle this moment and how we can respond to it. So keep leaning forward and keep trying to do everything you can to make this a positive time of growth for yourself and for everyone else around you. Thanks. We'll see you in the next webinar.